Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Konoha Begged Banished. Naruto to return back to Konoha Part 1, and if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel, it motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you. All now let's start the fanfic within Fire Country. Deep within one of the many forests of the Fire Country, bodies of bandits laid strewn across the ground with a few hanging on branches. There weren't even twitching, all of them were dead, killed in different ways, each sword slashes broken necks along with other broken body parts, burned alive, drowned, slashed in multiple places or stabbed. These bodies were once missing nin who had originally tried to kill their target for the large bounty on the target's head, but instead they were the ones who were killed. The killer of these men, who was still fighting some remain bandits, was a young man who looked like he was in his late teens or early 20s. He stood about 171 centimeters in height and had tan skin with no signs of baby fat whatsoever, merely lean muscle. His hair was a short spiky red color, but a red-colored kitsune mask that had blue-colored designs covered his face, thus denying people the chance to see his true identity. The clothing he wore consisted of a long black cloak with long sleeves, a hood attached, and red stripes going over the sleeves, including around the wrist collars, down the cloak's edges and the back, as well as the hood too. At the center of the cloak's back was a large red whirlpool symbol. Underneath that was a long-sleeved blue shirt and mesh shirt. Under the former, black fingerless gloves covered his hands in dark crimson. Bracers were strapped around his forearms. Over his legs were black pants, while he had blue sandals on his feet. In the man's right hand was a katana that instead of silver had a red blade, which was attached to a black and red striped handle with a round black guard. The blood on the blade blended in easily with it every time the man struck someone down, as he struck down another one. The leader, a missing nin, decided to use ninjutsu instead of trying to charge in. Blindly acting quickly, the ninja formed several hand seals, cat and great fireball jutsu, and unleashed a large fireball straight towards the redhead man. Said man did nothing as the fireball consumed him in an inferno of death. The missing nin watched the scene with relief as his attack burned the spot where the redhead man stood. That was until he briefly saw something pass by him, and then nothing but darkness. The kitsune mask man watched, left hand raised with a double-bladed edge ninju in it and blood on it, as the missing nin's head fell off from its body towards the ground, followed by said body soon after, with all of them dead. The masked man cleaned the blood off of the ninju but not the red-bladed katana before sealing them away, and began making his way towards the border. But just as he made a turn, he paused and a second later thrust his left hand out with speed that a few could keep up. The hand grabbed something and the kitsune man looked at it. He saw it was a bug, or to me more precise, a unique insect used by a clan that the redhead was familiar with. Looking at it for a few seconds, the masked man shifted his gaze to the left, his eyes concentrated on something that he could see. Then he looked back at the bug and with a simple movement crushed the Kaiju. Once done, redhead released its remains and then disappeared from the area. Shino, Abame AJ, and rank shinobi of Konaha was staying perfectly still behind the tree he was using as a cover. While upset and angry of one of his bug's death, he knew that logically he would be no match for the kitsune masked man due to the high chakra he was given off. Furthermore, the Kaiju had not died in vain, because while the masked man was focused on that one, another of Shino's insects had managed to acquire some of the man's chakra to confirm his true identity even after 6 years, and despite drastic changes to his person from what could be seen, the man's chakra remained the same, and Shino confirmed that the kitsune mask wearing man was indeed Naruto Uzumaki. In all honesty, Shino hadn't even expected to find Naruto. He had been returning from a mission given to him by his clan to check out a site where rare insects that could use chakra were spotted. The mission had been successful and Shino began his journey back to Konaha with a jar of some of the insects. That is when he noticed several chakra signatures a mile or so away from the Abame. Several of them were at least Shunin level, but one of them was far greater, near Cage level if not greater. Not only that, but it was familiar too, while the weaker chakra signals were disappearing one by one, and so after sending several Kaiju carrying a scroll for the Hokage, Shino rushed off to investigate, and he was indeed right in who it was. The large chakra had belonged to Naruto Uzumaki, a former genin of Konoha, banished 6 years ago. After making sure that Naruto was gone, Shino headed back to Konoha to inform the Hokage that his suspicion were correct and that Naruto was still alive and heading towards Wind Country, most likely Sonokar. He had contemplated about sending some of his insects to track Naruto, but the Abame went against it. The reason was because it was clear that Naruto would easily detect them the moment they were near him, thus Shino decided it would be wiser to inform the Hokage right away. Wind Country Sonokar. Within the center of the village known as Sonokar, where the Saz Cage's tower was, the god Case Cage Gar was currently in his office. Normally, like almost every day, the young Cage would be sitting in his desk doing the bane of all Cage's paperwork. However, today Kami seemed to be on Gaara's side, as there was little documents to look over and sign, so the redhead managed to finish up early and was now spending time by sitting cross-legged on the floor with an infant about a year old in front of him. The infant, a boy to be precise, was almost an exact replica of Gar, except instead of reddish brown hair, the child had full brown hair, and while he had the young Kag's green eyes, he didn't have the black rings around his eyes that Gar possessed, nor the conifer love written in red on his forehead. The baby, wearing a light brown sleeping suit, was sitting upright on his bum with a purple baby seat supporting him. The infant was happily playing with the number of toys around him, picking one up, playing with it, and then putting it down and moving on to the next. Now and then, the infant would look up towards his father, in which Gar would give a small smile in return, causing his son to giggle happily and returning his attention on another toy. Gar heard the door to his office open slightly before closing behind him, but he did not seem to mind, and neither the new occupant in the room, as he knew who it was. You still haven't learned of knocking even after 6 years? Hanero, the revealed and unmasked person. Naruto, whose whiskers were now darker, just smirked at his fellow geeky and good friend. I wouldn't be me if I did that, now would I? Then he looked at the baby, who was staring back with a curious look in his eye and a chubby fist rubbing his nose. Hi Gakuo-chan, how you've been? Naruto asked kindly. The baby only gurgled before stretching his other arm out towards his father, his eyelids becoming heavy. Hey, where's Kanan? Naruto asked his friend, who was picking up his sleepy son from the floor. She is back home with Mori and your daughter, whom I'm sure is the reason for your arrival, Gar said as he used his sand to put everything in his office back in place, while at the same time sealed up Gakudu's toys. Matsui wanted Ka to stay indoors since she seems to be less anxious in seeing the rest of the village than Gakuo, as Naruto shrugged and followed Gar out. Well, if you're going home, then I might as well follow you. I have to pick up Kiko-chan and meet Eugen-san at Spring Country, since Suna might be getting some unexpected guests in a few days, Naruto said as he followed the Saz Cage out of his office. Gar raised an eyebrow at that before narrowing, understanding the hidden message. Someone from Konoha saw you. It was not a question. Naruto shrugged. Yeah, I figured it would be better to head back here and pick up Kiko-chan instead of just waiting for them to give up searching for me. Gus said nothing at first as they exit the building and headed back towards the young Saz Cage's house, where his wife, daughter, and his friend's daughter would be waiting for them while jumping through the roof. Gar looked back at Naruto. You know you could accept my offer of giving you asylum, saying that you're staying here under my protection. Heck, why haven't the other nations or villages that you've saved done the same thing? The Case Cage commented. Naruto shrugged. Well, for one, I don't feel like being a burden to my friends, and two, giving me asylum would cause too much political problems with Konoha and most likely Ire country if I accepted yours or the others' offers. Naruto answered. Gar gave the redhead a questionable look, blinked, and said, since when has any of that stopped you? He dead panned. Naruto smirked at the comment. True, but I didn't have someone precious to take care of during those times. Konoha HOK Mansion HOK Office. Tsunade listened to Shino as he finished his report. When she first read the scroll the had sent beforehand, she thought it was her bad luck again, only to find out it wasn't. It looked like Lady Luck was on her side this time, that is, depending if they could convince Naruto to come back, as she dismissed Shino. Tsunade's thoughts went back to how this whole mess had started. It had begun when Sasuke Ucha, one of the two survivors of the Uchiha clan massacre, the other being his older brother and the perpetrator of said massacre, had dared the village of Konoha the reason to join the Shinobi Orochimaru for power to kill his brother Itachi Uchiha. After the snake Sonin gave Sas a curse mark, he left the village at night and was escorted by 4 of Orochimaru's elite shinobi. In response, the god Hokage Tsunade Senju granddaughter and grandniece of the Shodan Hokage and Nad Hokage respectively, as well as one of the Sannin. Trained under the San name Hokage here as in Surat Toy, her teammates being Ja. And the rogue nin Orochimaru had sent out a team to retrieve Sasuke and bring him back, however due to the lack of manpower within the village thanks to an invasion a few months prior, all that Tsunade could send out was a team of Jonin led by a newly minted Chunin to retrieve the UCHA. One of the Jonin was Naruto Uzumaki the Kabijiki, and one of Sasuke's teammates. The mission was a success, though two of the members were critically injured. They would live, however, after intense surgery and medical ninjutsu done by her Chisun and several other Konoha Hermetic nins. The team, with help from the Sand siblings, killed all four members of Orochimaru's elite guards, the Sound Four, along with the fifth member Kamaro Kaya, who succumbed to a disease he had, according to Gar. Naruto himself faced and defeated Sasuke Uchi, bringing his unconscious teammate back to Konoha, but little did anyone know that would be Naruto's last time in the village since his birth and becoming the Gariki of the Kabi. Naruto Uzumaki has been hated by the majority of the village and sometimes beaten. To the leaders of these beatings and other sorts were the members of the civilian council. This group consisted of wealthy merchants and other positions of power that were more interested in their desires than the village, such as making Naruto's life miserable. They also worshipped Sasuke Uchiha, keeping him on a pedestal in order to get on his good side and his clan's wealth, and with said boy injured by the one that they scorned for so long, they finally had a way of getting rid of the demon brat through careful planning and sneaking in a few documents into certain piles. They had managed to begin their plan. To explain more clearly, Tsunade Senju, the granddaughter and grandniece of the Shodan Hokage and Nadim Hokage respectively, and the current God Hokage, was focused more on healing the members of the retrieval team, particular Choji Akamaiki and Nehaga, the two being in critical condition than all the others sent on the mission, also in order to calm her rattled nerves when doing these serious medical operations. She drank a lot of sake to keep going. In fact, she was so busy and drunk that she hadn't been looking at what she was signing one day when she was more focused on the current status of the retrieval team members, for if she had, she would have noticed that one of the forms was a clause slipped in by the civilian council with the help of Danzo wanting her approval for a 4-year banishment of one Naruto Uzumaki, along with sealing his chakra, nullifying any summoning contract he had in, forbidding him from entering Konoha and to a lesser extent Fire Country. During his banishment to Danzo, with the boy out of the village, he could capture him and make Naruto into the weapon that Danzo believed he should have been, but it was too late and the deed was done the next day. To Anu, both assuming that the order they were following was approved by the Hokan Council, entered the hospital room that Naruto was resting in and informed him of his banishment. This news shocked Naruto, and it was then after anyone who saw him would say he looked like a broken man whose entire life was shattered in an instant, though the only people who'd seen him after that were Zero, since his female teammate refused to meet with him. Since she blamed Naruto for Sasuke's condition, his sensei seemed to be more concerned with Sadukai as well. The rest of his friends and loved ones were busy and unaware of his banishment and the fact that the U had taken him to the prisoner wing of the hospital so he could finish recovering before they put the seals on him didn't help much. However, according to the Anu, our former Anu, now courtesy of Naruto, somehow had managed to leave the village before any other seal was placed, minus the seal that broke his contract with the Toads. After that he disappeared off the face of the map, and even with Jia's spy network couldn't find him, and since his contract with the Toads had been cancelled, they couldn't reverse summon him back to Konoha. Tsunade found out after finishing up her other business, and when her former teammate Jiraiya appeared in her office with a rare angry look on his face when Gamabunta told him that Naruto's contract was cancelled. When the Toad Sage told her, followed by him scolding her for not looking at what she signed, the God Hokage went ballistic in a form both of rage, guilt and grief that she was tricked into banishing someone that she had just recently held dear to her like a son, almost after calming down and demolishing the gate that Naruto had left through, along with everything else nearby that wasn't inhabited. Tsunade called a meeting of the council in order to find out who tricked her in doing this deed. After finding out the culprits, with them being either killed, imprisoned or removed from their positions on the council, Tsunade had to deal with two more problems besides finding Naruto: Akatsuki In dealing with a group of furious nations and villages, the latter which consisted of Spring Country, Wave Country, Tea Country, Wind Country, Saker, Taki Gakure and Yuki Gakure, all of these places and the people in them, especially the village leaders and dows, were greatly indebted to Naro for saving them. They were also not pleased of how their hero was treated during his childhood and now his banishment, favoring over a boy who had tried to turn traitor just because he was the last of his clan, and while they still traded with them or have an alliance due to politics stopping them from breaking all ties from Konoha and Fire Country completely, they were hardly friendly with the village founded by Hashirama Senju, and Tsunade had a good feeling that they would secretly offer Naruto asylum, if not so already. The former Akatsuki was more troubling than the latter. Jiraiya told her that it was a group of several S-rank missing nin, and seeing how two of their members were Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hosaki, the latter being a former member of Kiri's Seven Swordsmen, and that her other former teammate Oromaru used to be member, showed that this group was one not to be trifled with. Also, from the little information the Toad Sage could uncover were that Akatsuki had an interest with the Bu, all 9 of them. For whatever reason or purpose was unknown, but anyone with an interest in the Bu was anything but good, especially if they were a criminal organization. Tsunade believed that this group, and in turn finding Naruto, were more important than worrying about a bunch of pissed off nations and villages. So for the past 6 years since that horrible day, Jiraiya has had his spy network looking up for any signs of Naruto's whereabouts, while he still sent information regarding anything else of importance to Konoha. Anything concerning either Akata's or Naruto were sent directly to her, the contents only known to Tsunade, Jia and Tsunade's assistant and senior student Shisen. Once the door to her office clicked shut, leaving just herself and Shisen, Tsunade let out a long sigh before speaking to the open air. What do you think? Jiraiya behind her, sitting on an open window, was the Toad Sage and her former teammate Jiraiya. The man also had a frown on his face and was deep in thought before speaking. Well, Shino seemed pretty sure that this person was Naruto when he sensed the chakra. Members aren't usually wrong when it comes to identifying chakra similar to the Aga clan, Jiraiya said, feeling relieved that after 6 years of no news of his godson that said boy was still alive. Then he added, got to admit that wearing a mask to hit his face was a pretty smart move of the Gaki, though the description of it rings a bell, but I can't remember where. The Toad Sage said. Tsunade-sama, what should we do? Shisen asked, finally speaking with the Hokage's pet pig Tunin, letting out an oink as if asking the same thing too. After thinking for a moment, Tsunade let out a sigh. According to Shino, Naruto appeared to have been heading towards Wind Country, most likely going towards Suna Singara as K-Cage. And those two are friends, the Hokage said before pulling out a scroll wheel. Send a team there to see if the Gaki is staying at Suna and hopefully convince Naruto that it's safer in Konoha than anywhere else. Among all those that were angry over Naruto's banishment, Go was at the top of the list. A testament to that was that the young man almost killed the entire civilian council when he heard them saying some negative things about Naruto being a geeky himself. Gar understood what Naruto went through, and along with that was deeply indebted to the Uzumaki for helping him to get out of his original belief, namely killing everyone and acting like a psychotic killer. In fact, Gar owed Naruto for everything in and getting him to where he was now as K-Cage of Sonokar, and a married man to boot. After telling Shisen to get Team S, the young woman left the office, thus leaving 2 of the 3 Sonin as the only occupants in the room. Jiraiya looked towards his blonde female teammate. You know, the chances of him wanting to return are slim, he said grimly. Tsunade sighed, knowing how true that was. I know, Jiraiya, I know, but what choice do we have? If that group Akatsuki finds out where Naruto is, then they'll attack Suna twice as hard, since Gar is also one of their targets. Suna doesn't have enough manpower to repel them. Also, what's stopping Danzo from sending his root goons to get Naruto? When not, if he learns about this and whether or not he succeeds, will have a war against Suna because of his actions. The Hokage then led back on her chair, looked down at her desk, rubbing her forehead. We just have to pray that Naruto still has some love for the village to come back, and if he does, I'll announce his heritage to the villagers in Shinobi to make his life easier. Minato and Kash's enemies be damned, the Hokage finished. Speaking of Shinobi, why did you decide to send Team 7? Jiraiya asked the Hokage. Well, I'm hoping that by sending his old team, one of them being his crush, it will convince Naruto to return back to the village willingly, Tsunade replied. Before adding, however, by the sound of your tone you have your doubts about that, while normally that kind of thing could work, but concerning this certain team it's a different matter, Jiraiya said. Kakashi focused more on Sasuke than he did on Sakura and Naruto, with said Kunoichi being a fangirl despite your training and hit Naruto more than you did to me. Hila even heard that she blamed the Gaki for hurting the Chia before Naruto left the village 6 years ago. I mean, sure, you managed to change Sasuke's way of thinking and views towards Naruto, but that was after the Gaki left. And then there is Sai, the new member, whom I'm sure you've noticed that he screams root all over. All in all, I think either Team 8, 9 or 10 would have been a better choice. Hell, sending Shizen or Iruka would be even better, Jiraiya stated. Tsunade sighed in annoyance since she knew what Jiraiya was saying. I know what you mean, but those teams are already out on missions, and by the time they return Naruto might be in a different place now. And now that you mention it, Sai will most likely report this to Danzo, being one of his drones. And that seal on his tongue, I'm still looking into that, but it's a piece of work though, Gia added, and that Warhawk will bring it up at the next meeting and will either try to push for the Gak's return, or worse, him and those other CPS will want to label him as a missing nin. Also, some of the members of those other teams saw Naruto as the fox due to the civilian council's actions of breaking Sensei's law until they were finally broken out of it. Tsunade finished when Naruto was banished that had inadvertently removed the Sandaime Hokage's law concerning Naruto's status as a Geeki, in revealing it to the younger generation. With that gone, the civilian council, along with several other civilians and shobi that hated Naruto because of the fox, revealed to the younger generation of the Kabi. Because of that, said generation was now divided upon what they now thought about the former genin, and more importantly, it caused a rift between the dubbed rookie 12 feet Naruto's old friends on one side were the side that didn't believe the crap that the civilian council and other Naruto haters said, and saw Naruto as a person and friend and not the fox. The first one was the lazy genius Shikamaru, who had quickly put 2 and 2 together and didn't hate Naruto, thinking he was the fox, and following him was Choi, Shikamaru's best friend, who believed Shikamaru and was good friends with Naruto too when they were younger. The next was Tenten, who didn't see anything that screamed demonic or evil about Naruto, along with her boyfriend Nei Hyuga, who also owed Naruto for helping the Hyuga prodigy open his eyes. After that was Shino Abame and Nei's cousin Hinata Hyuga, the former like Shikamaru figured it out quickly and found it illogical for Naruto to be a threat to anyone, or to be even considered the Kabi in human form, since it was the same as saying an Abame was a bug. Hinata refused to believe that her longtime crush was a demon, since she knew that someone as caring, protective and determined such as Naruto could ever be a walking mass of destruction and malice. The last person, surprisingly, was none other than Sasuke Ucha, who after his return to Konoha and his discharge from the hospital had a long private chat with both Tsunade and Gia. They showed him the results of using Orochimaru's cursed seal, the same seal said man had given to Sas, and what the seal did to the body that was to discourage Sas from doing another stunt like that one again. What they did next was that Gia and Tsunade revealed to Sasuke the truth behind the Uchi massacre, which Jiraiya had learned from Sarutoi before the Sandaime Hokage's death, and every file on Naruto and the miserable life the boy had in the village. It was from these things that changed Sake from trying to leave the village to gain power to kill his brother Itachi, as well as regretful for his actions that caused Naruto's banishment. The other side, unfortunately, was the side that believed Naruto was the fox, despite what their parents said, with their reasons being stupid and shallow. Until a year after the boy's banishment, Sakura and Ino were the worst, the both of them being Uchiha fangirls, and thus hated Naruto for the extreme injuries given to Sake. Anba hated Naruto because of the power he had, along with his defeat by said boy's hand, and the fact that Hinata had a crush on Naruto too. Lee was somewhat on their side since he wanted Sakura's attention, but it caused a rift between him and his sensei Maeda guide. Said Taijutsu master, disappointed in his prized student's unyouthful decision. This caused several rifts within the teams of the Rookie 12, however, that all quickly changed when Lee Ino and Sakura were scolded by Gai Shikamaru and Tsunade respectively of how foolish and shallow their hatred for Naruto was. Did the three finally snap out of it while KBA had it beaten into his head by his mother Sum Inuzuka and his sensei literally. For now, let's just hope that Kakashi can convince Naruto to come back without using force. Tsunade of The present mumbled but loud enough for her former teammate to hear hidden location deep within the darkness of a dark cave. The astral images of 9 figures could be seen standing in a circle, one of them with metallic silver and rippling eyes spoke first. It appears that the Kabigiki has been discovered, the man said before turning his attention to another person, a male that had the unusual appearance of having a Venus fly trap attached to his body. Zetsu, the first man said. Zetsu spoke to the others in his 2 different voices. Turns out he's actually Kodama Fox, spirit, that wandering nin whom made a name for himself these past few years. White Zetsu said he was headed towards Wind Country, most likely to Suna, since he's good friends with the Case Cage. Black Zetsu finished. So now 2 of our targets are in the same place. Kisame, a former Kirin nin and member of the 7 swordsmen with a shark-like appearance, said maybe, but it's most likely that he won't stay there for long. Pei, the leader and the man with the unusual eyes, said. According to Zetsu, the Gariki was seen by a Konoha shinobi who most likely put 2 and 2 together and has reported it to the Hokage, meaning that might send a team to retrieve him from Suna. He'll also be a challenge to take down Kakuzu, the banker of Akatsuki, said. If he is Kodama, then he'll be shrank. If his achievements or anything to go by, the bounty placed on his head is enough to set someone for life. Perhaps we should ignore him for now. Itachi Uchiha, the man responsible for the UCH clan massacre and Sasa's older brother, suggested. While this is the first sighting we have of him for over 6 years, we do not know Naruto's full abilities right now. Going after him unprepared would be unwise. Pain nodded in agreement, though he was confident he could handle the boy. Agreed. Besides, we need to seal the Kabi last anyway. What is the status of the other Gariki? Well, the Abi is in Suna, as you already know. The Nibi hasn't been leaving Kumo as much, but she still takes missions, so there will be an opening the next time she does. The Sambi is still in the same lake it's been in for the past 3 years undisturbed, so now would be the best time to snag it before Kiri gets wind of its location. The Yumi is still wandering around Earth Country, and the last time he's made contact with anyone from Iowa was 2 years ago, so he's pretty much isolated, though Iowa seems to be getting restless of having their Geeki out of the village, so they might send people to get them. The GOI is actually back in the village, and by his own will. From the looks of things, the Rokubi was traveling around Fire Country with a member of the Sumo clan a few months ago, but they were allowed to join Kiri again since the civil war was over, and the Geeki was given a full pardon by the god Mizukage. The Nanabi is currently in Taki Gakar, though she does take missions, so we can wait for the next time she leaves the village, but she's also gained more control over her Bu, and she can fly now too. The Heibi we should also avoid for now, because he's being confined in Kumo, though he leaves the village now and then to train in some mountain area in Lightning Country. Both sides of Zetsu said together. I see. Pain said before looking at the rest of the members of Akatsuki. We'll focus on the Sambi since it's still in the wilderness and is alone. Sorry, that will be your assignment, and afterwards you and Dara will make your way towards Suna. Dia, you will go capture the Ebi, since your skills will be useful with the Geeki being in the village most of the time. The rogue Suna puppeteer and the Iowa bomber nodded. Wouldn't it be better for me to get the Sandy, since it's in the water and I'm a Sweden user? Kisame said, voicing his opinion. True, but you and Itachi will be going to retrieve the Yanbi since it's far away from the village. According to our intel, the Geeki has the lava release K-Gen, which is also enhanced by the Yanbi. Your Sweden techniques and chakra absorbing abilities would prove more beneficial with that. Pain said after hearing the reason and the logic behind it. Kiss nodded and backed down. Pei continued. Soon after, it is doubtful that the Rokubi will leave Kiri for missions anytime soon, since the village is still recovering for the civil war, which goes for the same for the Heibi, whose brother the Rakage keeps him in Kumar. So we'll ignore those 2 along with the GOI and the Kabi for the time being, which leaves us the Ni and Nanabi. The former is assigned to Hedon, while the latter is assigned to Kakuzu, since we don't know yet when they will be out of the village. You 2 will remain on standby and make the best of it while increasing our funding so we can continue later missions. Great, more dumbass bounty hunting when I could be doing better. In Jashin Sama's name, Hedon cursed with his usual swearing mouth. Shut it, Hedon, your damn religion is the reason why we have to earn more cash in the first place. Kakuzu snapped. What will I be doing, leader Sama? White Zetsu asked. You will continue surveying the Kabi Jiki so we can get a better grasp of his abilities. If he is Indeed, this Kodama person, then he will not be an easy target, Payne said before. Eventually ending the meeting, and one by one the images faded away. 3 days later, Wind Country Team 7. The reformed Team 7, consisting of 1 Jan and 3 Chunin, had recently made it into Wind Country about yesterday, and after camping out in a cave to avoid the nighttime sandstorms, the team had continued on its way towards Suna with 2 different set of orders. The first and official order was for the team to deliver a scroll with a letter from Tsunade discussing the trade agreements between the 2 villages. She had originally planned to send it a week later since the deadline was only 2 weeks away, but she figured that this would be a good excuse to get a chance of finding Naruto. This led to the second and unofficial order given to Team 7 by the Godam Hokage confirmed Naruto Uzumaki was staying in Suna and tried to convince him to return to Konoha for safety against Akatsuki force being only a last resort, also with the Sasuke's sister Temari staying in Konoha due to her role as ambassador. Tsunade wanted the team to leave as soon as possible before the Suna Kunoichi caught on and warned her brother and Naruto ahead of time. Of course, the idea of questioning Temari about how long she knew, if at all, of Naruto's interactions with Suna came up. But Tsunade shot that down. Not only would that cause international problems between Konoha and Suna, Temari was very strong-willed and equally skilled and might escape before they could question her. Also, Tsunade would probably get an earful from Yoshino Nara, the woman being angry that the Hokage and Ja might have ruined her chance of getting a daughter-in-law, since it was well known that Temari and Shikamaru Nara were dating. The fact that the lazy genius was always assigned to escort Temari helped too, but back to Team 7, Sun sent them, as not only were they the only team available she could trust, but she hoped that they could better convince Naruto. But as explained by Gia before, force might open right at the get-go due to the history of that this team had with Naruto Uzumaki, who originally was a member of it. Kakashi Hatake, the Janin instructor, was ashamed of himself for not trying to be a better teacher to his team and not pointing Naruto and Sakura in the right directions to make them stronger. Those things had caused him to lose respect from his Jonin colleagues and even his lead a bit. For the past 6 years he has been doing everything in his powers to make amends for those failures, especially to his sensei for failing his legacy, and hopefully he can correct that mistake today. Sake was also hoping for redemption on his part that caused Nut's banishment. After the meeting with Tsunade and Gia 6 years ago, Sasuke became a changed man from the brooding Avenger boy he was once. He was ashamed of what his plan had become before Itachi killed them, and while he understood why his brother did it, Sake still desired to be the one to bring Itachi to justice, and at the very least to understand why Itachi did it. Of course, Sake was also focused on finding Naruto, but also knew that trying to get the blonde to return to a village that treated him like wasn't going to be easy. And they don't know Naruto changed his hair color. Sakura had changed much over the past 6 years, and not just her skills. While originally she hated Naruto for critically injuring Sas, she soon learned the hard way that that kind of thinking did her little good, as Sas yelled at her for sighing with him when he tried to leave the village to join a sick missing nin and nearly got the team sent to get him, including Naruto nearly killed. It also should be noted that Sakura was nearly strangled to death by Tsunade during one of her lessons. Did Sakura finally see how shallow her reasons were and that she had done nothing but hurt Naruto? The fourth and final member in Naruto's replacement, Sai, was really had no opinion on the matter of what he thought of Naruto. This was due to the fact the pale boy doesn't know the Kaui Jin Sheriki personally, and that he was focused on following both the orders of the Hokage and his true master Danzo Shimura. Said orders were to bring the Geki back to the village Sadano, whether with or without Tsunade's permission, place a loyalty seal on Naruto to ensure his loyalty to Konoha and to Danzo. Back in the present, the 4 Konoha shinobi continued their trek across the desert. Before Sai's eyes widened for a brief moment, Kakashi-san, I see my ink birds and rats returning, the pale boy said to the Janin. His 2 other students stopped when Sai announced this. Kakashi had Sai send several of his ink creatures ahead to scout the land towards Suna, just in case Naru passed them or something. The rest of the team watched as the ink creatures landed on a pulled-out piece of paper. Sai had out quickly. The animals took the forms of letters while the rest formed a map. What do they say? Kakashi asked. They say that a person that matches the description that shows San gave is walking away from the Village towards the border of fire country by the looks of it, Sai said in his usual mind-unknown voice. Kakashi's visible eye widened for a moment but returned to normal before anyone saw which way he asked quickly. Sai pointed towards the east about 4 miles that way, just near where there is a cluster of rocks nearby. If we move now we should make it there in about 30 minutes or less and can intercept him, Sai reported. Okay everyone, we move towards the cluster and wait for Naruto there. We won't move until we confirm it is, Kakashi said to the others, and remember, we're to try and convince him peaceful to return to the village forces to be used only as a last resort. Understood, Kakashi emphasized the last part towards Sakura especially, who had a dark look in her eyes before it vanished. Soon all three Chunin nodded before they took off towards the direction S pointed to while they were running. Sass decided to bring up one fact. You know, the chances of us even getting to agree to come back to the village are very low, Sake said. Kakashi didn't say anything to that but merely nodded at the truth in those words. Sai however commented, doesn't matter if he agrees or not, duck. But our orders are to retrieve him no matter what. Sai said. The comment on the Uchiha's hair earned a glare from said boy and a lump on the head courtesy of a certain pink-hair girl and a sigh from the Jan with Naruto. Naruto halted in his leisurely walk, being careful not to awaken the small sleeping bundle strapped to his back. His blue eyes narrowed. Kurama, Naruto said to the Kabi that was sealed inside of him, I sense it to Kit the fox with 9 tals said, who had originally been asleep but now had one eye lazily open. Several chakra signatures heading towards you and 3 of them are familiar and the 4th one is unknown. Kurama added, it has to be Konoha. Naruto thought to himself, but also to Kurama, the chakra signatures are a bit different but still familiar. The only people I can think of that the old hag would send after me would be. Naruto's eyes widened as he figured it out before they narrowed, followed by a low growl. Kurama, having already figured it out as well, chuckled darkly. Looks like it's going to be a regular team reunion, the Kawi said dry, though he knew that Kurama was joking. Naruto also knew that he couldn't really escape using Mado, his own space-time ninjutsu that he created from studying his father's Horin. He had managed to acquire his father and mother's notes on the night he ran away from Konoha. When he learned about his origins from the Kabi himself, said Bu stated that he had no desire to have a weak container or being anyone's pawn, especially a certain Warhawk, due to the fact that he had none of his special double-edged bladed ninju close enough to teleport them to, excluding the one he kept in Sun with G's permission. But he couldn't go back there because even though Gar could deny Konoha of giving them Naruto, the Uzumaki knew that it wouldn't stop his former village from trying to bring him back to Konoha for his safety. So Naruto figured that the best thing to do would be to stall his former teammates long enough for him to place one of his ninja to close enough for him to teleport to, but far enough so that he would have a good distance away from his pursuers. With that decision made, Naruto bit his right thumb and then formed the hand signs before slamming it on the ground, saying Kuchi's no jutsu, and then a puff of smoke that reached Naruto's waist appeared. When it disappeared, in its place was a fox with a long tail and dark red fur with 2 yellow stripes that looked like lightning going of its body from its eyes to its tail. Hello Naruto-sama, do you require my assistance? The fox asked with a voice that was obviously male. Hey Doro-san, I got some pursuers heading towards me and don't have enough time to get some distances from them either, Naruto said as he touched the red bracer on his left hand, releasing a ninju that was sealed in it. He then handed it to the fox named Doro. I need you to take this in Kiko-chan to the borders of Fire Country, which is a few miles away, while I distract them. Once you reach the border, send a pulse of chakra through this ninju that will alert me and I'll teleport right away. Nar finished. Understood Naruto-sama, Doro said as he used his tail to grab the weapon by its handle. Then Naruto carefully detached the baby carrier that held Kiko before attaching it to Dork body, making sure that the toddler was resting on the fox's back. The slight movement pulled back the hood on the girl's orange sweater, revealing her red hair with pigtails. The jostling also woke her up slightly as her eyelids opened, revealing weary and tired purple eyes that stared at Naruto's blue eyes. Daddy, she said tiredly, her eyelids slowly closing. Naruto just smiled at his 3-year-old daughter before rubbing a comforting hand over her red hair. Don't worry sweetie, Daddy Y just needs to deal with some bad people, so you'll be riding Doro-san for a little bit, but Daddy will be back soon, Naruto replied to the child, whom had already fallen back asleep. Giving a nod to the fox, Naruto watched as Doro sped off towards the border at a speed that would have made a certain green spandex wearing shinobi and his mini version jealous as the fox sped off. Naruto let out a brief sigh, eyes closed before they snapped back open instantly. A determined and hard glare now showing in his eyes as he prepared to deal with his former team a couple of minutes later. Naruto was walking through the cluster of rocks that Sai had described around the same time the redhead had a calm look on his face as he walked through the cluster of rocks. He continued walking when he sensed several nearby chakra signatures acting on instincts. Naruto vanished from his spot on top of a large rock, looking down at his previous position just as four people surrounded it. Three of them he recognized and one he didn't. Kakashi was the first to recover from the surprise of how fast Naruto moved, but was even more surprised when he got a good look of his former student. The Uzumaki now had red spiky hair that his mother's clan was well known for instead of the yellow hair that he had inherited from his father. The former Konoha shinobi, however, still had his blue eyes snapping out of his stupor. Kakashi gave his signature eye smile. Yo Naruto, how's it been? Naruto raised an eyebrow as if he was trying to figure out if Kakashi was joking. Kakashi, I would call you sensei, but seeing how I'm no longer one of your students and that you've never really been an act sensei, I won't, Naruto said nonchalantly. Okay, I guess I had that coming, Kakashi thought to himself before regaining his composure and speaking. Naruto, we've been sent by orders of the Hokage to. I have no intentions of going back to that hellhole of a village, Naruto said in a serious voice, cutting off Kakashi's sentence. Despite the fact I was banished, I feel a lot happier than I've ever been in my whole life, and I won't be taken back to a place that would rather see me dead. If you refuse to come back willingly, then we will capture and force you back, Dick less Sai said emotionlessly, though the last part earned a tick mark from Naruto, but said person merely pushed it aside. I'm guessing he's my replacement, Naruto asked, getting a nod from Kakashi. His manners need some working since it's clear that he has no knowledge of negotiating if he talks like that, Naruto commented. Sakura gave Sai another lump on the head, seeing how he made the situation worse while that was happening. Sake spoke. Look Naruto, the Hokage made a mistake and she's sorry. She even put down those idiot civilian council members that tricked her, and she's willing to compromise. Also, there's a group of this time Sasa was cut off by Naruto's class missing nin who are after me for the Kabi la blah blah, Naruto said boringly. I already know that, and I've been doing a wonderful job of staying out of their radar, and I'm more than ready to deal with them, he said. Naruto, please, you can't really believe that you can take on a group of shinobi of cage level strength on your own. You won't be able to stand a chance by yourself. Tsunade-sama knows this and wants you to come back so she can protect you, Sakura said, but flinched at the glare the redhead gave her. I really don't want to hear anything from you, Sakura, especially not about helping me, seeing how many times you've countlessly hit me for petty to no reasons at all, just for being myself or trying to help you. Sakura couldn't help but flinch again at that and had the decency to look ashamed. Now you all have one chance to get out of my sight and never bother me again, or else I'll use more extreme methods. Kakashi sighed, seeing how this was not going the way he wanted it to go. I guess there really isn't anything we can do to convince you, he said, not asked, as he pulled up his headband revealing his Sharingan, ignoring the roaring demands of Arama to rip the cursed eye from Haki's face. Naruto calmly replied, no, there isn't. He finished before using his advanced Shanin Zanzo after image disappearing into thin air and then reappeared before Team 7, shocking them at the incredible speed the redhead just showed. However, before they could react, Naruto raised both his hands and shouted Funa jet cannon and fired a powerful blast of wind chakra from both of his palms, which he had thrust forward. The results were all four members of Team 7 being blasted backwards from the impact of the wind and sent them back a great distance. Kakashi was the first to recover, having done a flip in midair and landed on the ground. Sasa skidded across the sandy ground, while Sakura, who had been in the center of the attack, had more trouble recovering and instead crashed into a nearby rock, causing a small crater in it from the impact. Well, that was interesting, Kakashi said as he regained his breathing. Despite having been able to land easier than the others, Naruto's attack took a lot of air out of him, literally. At least now we know that he's a wind user, the copycat shinobi commented. Yeah, but that means Lightning techniques won't work as well, Sake commented as he got up and had already pulled out his chakra blade. Chudo, we don't even know the full extent of his abilities, so that makes things even more troublesome. Back in Konaha, a certain Nara sneezed. What makes you think we'll give you times even to react? Naruto asked as he began focusing wind chakra into his right pointer finger Kuki Yuba air finger and fired a large blast of wind in the shape of a bullet right towards the two Sharingan users. However, Kakashi's experience came in handy as he quickly countered it. Dodendoru hey mud wall, Kakashi said as he finished the hand signs and slammed both hands on the ground. Then a wall of earth with 4 dog heads appeared before Kakashi and took the bullet of wind head on, while the earth wall managed to stop at the impact, caused it to crack severely for Midori Hake to be so seriously damaged. That's one hell of an attack, Naruto has, Kakashi thought to himself as he surveyed the damage while this was happening. As Sakura and Sai had not been standing idly by, Sai quickly took to the air on an ink bird while Sakura had charged towards Naruto's right side with a large clump of rock in her hand. Using her chakra enhanced strength, Sakura threw the rock towards Naruto, but in response Naruto merely smacked the rock to the side with ease and a bored look on his face as if he was unimpressed. However, Sakura used that brief moment to get closer to the redhead, preparing to deliver a strong punch to the face to knock Naruto out. But instead of getting the results she hoped for, Sakura was shocked to see Naruto merely raise his left hand and emit a brief pulse of chakra that cancelled out the chakra in Sakura's fist, allowing Naruto to grab it with ease. Naruto smirked at the shocked and confused look on his former teammate's face. In the end, Sakura, all you're good is hitting with your fist, thus showing your uselessness, Naruto remarked dry before grabbing Sakura's wrist and pulling the pink head closer towards her, and then delivered his own chakra-enhanced punch right into Sakura's stomach. This caused the Haruno to keel over and cough out some blood. Suddenly Naruto's ninja senses went up and the redhead turned to see Kakashi upon him, a suppression seal in his hand. Not to be overtaken by this, Naruto raised his right finger and fired another Kuki Yuba, but this time, instead of being large as the first one, this one was smaller, the actual size of a bullet, and a lot faster too. It quickly pierced Kakashi's right shoulder, surprising the Janin at the sudden attack, and dropped the suppression seal, but before he could recover, Naruto threw Sakura at Kakashi, sending both teacher and student flying backwards. Before he could relax, Naruto felt a shadow over him. Looking up, the redhead saw on his large ink beer bird release a dozen smaller ink birds with explosion tags attached to them straight towards the Uzumaki, but Naruto remained undeterred as he formed hand seals Futon Yofu Hawk wind, and then Naruto blew out some wind from his mouth while at the same time swiped his arms like wings and fired a large gust of wind in the shape of a hawk. The bird of wind made contact with the smaller ink birds, and suddenly the ink birds dispersed while at the same time the explosive notes attached to them went off, causing a large explosion in the air. Taking advantage of Naruto's attention on Sai, Sake charged in his Sharingan was active and sending lightning chakra into his Chudo. The Uchiha's plan was to touch Naruto with his blade and send out a brief pulse of electricity through the redhead's body, paralyzing him. At the same time, Sakura and Kakashi had managed to get themselves untangled, and the former charged in Onar as well, but none of them expected what came next. Naruto shot out his arms towards Sakura and Sake, and extending from them were chakra chains, the same ones Naruto's mother Kushina could use. The chains moved at blinding speed before wrapping themselves around Sakura and Sake, with the latter losing his grip on his Chudo with both of them caught. Naruto began swinging them around like flails, with Nar striking Sake into the ground hard while swinging Sakura upwards right towards Sai, who hadn't even seen it coming. The Kunoichi medic slammed right into the artist boy, destroying his ink bird and sending both of them crashing into the ground. After receding the chains back into him, Naruto looked around for his former sensei, only for him to be nowhere to be found. If he's not coming from the front, behind, left, right, or above, then that only leaves popping out of the ground beneath Naro were two hands that made a go for his redhead's feet, but instead Naruto shouted Fun Utan jet step, and suddenly Naruto's feet release a powerful burst of wind chakra that sent Naruto high into the air. At the same time, Kakashi was hit dead on by the burst of wind chakra, and the Naruto was sure he heard a few of the Jan's bones break, but it Turned out to be not when Kakashi suddenly dispersed from existence, revealing it to be a shadow clone and not the real one. Naruto looked to his right and saw the real Kakashi leap towards him, a tanto in hand. However, when Kakashi swung the tono at Naruto, lightning chakra infused with it, Naruto brought up his right bracer and sent chakra through it, thus a chakra shield appeared from the bracer and blocked the sword strike. Naruto then followed it up with grabbing Kakashi's right shoulder, where the wound from Naruto's Yuba still was, as it had yet to heal. The sudden pressure on the wound caused Kakashi to flinch and lower his guard, but gave Naruto an opening. "You're moving way too slow, Kakashi. Your age catching up to you," Nar asked mockingly. Then without warning, Naruto shouted Funu Kenju jet pistol and plowed a wind chakra punch right into Kakashi's chest, breaking some bones for sure this time, as well as sending Kakashi plummeting to the ground. Naruto, however, landed gracefully on a large rock overlooking where Kakashi crashed. "Chidori Espan," a voice shouted from behind Naruto. Said Redhead spun around to see Sake fire 100 or more lightning chakras Espan flying straight towards him, but Naruto reacted quickly while thinking, "I'll have to use a technique from my bloodline element to counter this, since I can't use a higher level futon technique to stop it," Nar thought as he formed 3 hand seals that ended with the ram seal on Moten Situ Satsu, a no jutsu Yinong release red hot shot technique, and then Naruto fired a large ball of red energy surrounded by electricity from his mouth and was the same size as a Gokaku no Jutsu great fireball technique. The ball made contact with the flying Espan but merely knocked them to the side as it continued flying towards the still shaked Ha. It was only a few seconds before it made contact with him did Sake snap out of his stupor and performed a quick substitute with a nearby rock. When the ball struck the rock, it exploded, not a loud explosion but still pretty noisy, and sending small debris of rock flying everywhere nearby the point of impact. Before Naruto could celebrate, several ink lions jumped up from all around him, getting ready to pounce on the Uzumaki. Acting quickly, Nar sent chakra to both of his bracers, causing chakra blades to pop out the front of the bracers. Now armed, Naruto began slashing through the ink lions with ease, ignoring as some of the ink splashed onto his clothes. Back with Kakashi, the Jan had been pulled out of the crater he had made by Sakura, who soon began running a diagnostic jutsu on her sensei. In front of them was Sai standing guard and drawing 3 more ink lions as Sakura began healing Kakashi as best she could, or until he could still fight. The silverhair Jan commented, "This is not going as well as I thought it would," Kakashi murmured, but loud enough for Sakura to hear. "I still can't believe how strong he is now. Naruto was never this strong 6 years ago," Sakura added as she healed the wound on Kakashi's shoulder, stopping the bleeding that had begun. "And those chakra chains were tough. I couldn't even break out of them." "Yeah," Kakashi murmured, a faraway look in his eyes as he remembered another Uzumaki who used the same chakra chains. "Where's Sass?" the Jan asked, getting out of memory lane. "Duck butt had just barely avoided some attack I've never seen before. I sent an ink clone to check on him while I'm having my ink lions distract Dick less," Sai said without looking at Kakashi. "But I can't keep this up forever though, and my attacks aren't really doing much to tire him down. Knowing Naruto, he won't tire out so quickly," Kakashi said as he started to get up. Sakura already finishing healing the more serious and painful wounds. It still hurt a little for him to get up, but Kakashi knew that lying down wasn't something he could do. "We need to find a way to freeze his movements, and then I can place a chakra suppression seal on him." However, Kakashi said, deep in thought. When he saw the curious looks on his 2 students, he explained, "So far Naruto hasn't shown any signs of trying to finish us off. This could mean that he doesn't want to kill us because he may still care for us, or that he doesn't want to be put into Konaha's bingo book, or it could mean that he's buying time to make an escape. The last one makes more sense since he made it clear before the fight that he doesn't want to cause a scene." The Jan finished. "Do you think he already has an escape plan and is just waiting?" Kakashi-sensei, Sakura asked while Sa drew one more group of ink lions to attack Naruto. The redhead didn't even look exhausted as he continued using his chakra blades to fight the lions, and now recovered. "Sake most likely, which means that we need to subdue him now before he escapes. We won't get another chance like this in a while," Kakashi said as he pulled out a kunai and charged in to join Sake. Followed by Sakura and Sai. Naruto had just destroyed the last ink lion when Sass charged towards him, deactivating his chakra blades. Naruto unsealed the red bladed katana and parried Sasuke's chudo before delivering a swift kick to the Uchiha's chest, but that didn't stop Sasuke, who recovered quickly before bringing down his chudo again. However, Naruto managed to stop the strike with his own sword once more, but the redhead glanced to see Sakura and Kakashi coming at him, the latter with a tanto in hand, not wanting to be pinned down so the others could strike. Naruto managed to swiftly knock Sasuke off his feet before sending a strong kick to the stomach. This sent Sasuke skidding backwards with the air knocked out of him too. During the charge, Kakashi had seen Naruto draw the red sword and his eyes had widened as he recognized it impossible that sword. It's Kashina, but it should still be in the estate at Konoha. Those were the thoughts going through Kakashi's head, but the Janin kept his composure as he prepared to get behind Naruto, hoping to knock him unconscious with a chop to the neck. Naruto saw Kakashi out of the corner of his eyes, as well as Sasuke, who had recovered, coming up from his left, while Sakura did a jump in the air and intended on attacking from above. Nar was about to act when he felt something liquid grab his legs. Looking down, Nar saw several ink snakes wrapping themselves around the Uzumaki's legs. They weren't holding him down indefinitely, but they were restricting his movement severely. Still, Naruto had been in these kinds of situations before and knew how to act accordingly in both freeing himself of the snakes and knocking his former teammates off their feet. Clapping his hands, Naruto shouted, "Futon Tatsumaki no Hashira tornado pillar," and right away a pillar of fast spinning wind popped from the ground surrounding Naruto while it dispersed the ink snakes. A few seconds later, the tornado expanded and struck Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura all at the same time. The spinning wind must have been sharp, as the three members of Team 7 had several cuts on their bodies. Rahul Sharma, with only a few being deep enough to cause bleeding. Just as the tornado dispersed, Naruto felt a sudden spike in his chakra. Doro had finally reached his destination and planted the ninju his ordered. "Well, I have to say that this little reunion was fun, but I'm afraid I have to be going now. See ya maybe." Naruto said the last part with a smirk before any of the Konoha shinobi could act. The redhead disappeared into thin air, leaving no trace that he was there whatsoever. Much to the shock of the others was that the horizon. Kakashi thought to himself in surprise as he looked at the spot that Naruto had been standing moments ago. Finally snapping himself out of his state of shock, the copycat shinobi got back up on his feet as he went to rejoin his team. Sakura was healing a few of the wounds she had just acquired from Naruto's last attack. Sai had just landed besides her, and since he was slightly chakra exhausted from making so many ink creatures at once, he didn't have multiple cuts on his body. Kakashi was actually a little bit better than Sakura, since his flak jacket took most of the damage from the tornado, though now it had numerous holes in it. Though he had some cuts on his arms, Sas was the farthest away from the expanding tornado and was slightly grazed by it, then injured. "Really, no one is seriously wounded, I presume?" Kakashi said to the three Chunin as he lowered his headband to cover his Sharingan. He winced, though, since the bones that were broken by Naruto's Funu kin hadn't been fully healed. "My wounds aren't a bad that I can't move properly," Sasuke said as he sat down on a small rock, catching his breath. "That battle was very intense and took a lot out of him, but I'm pretty sure if I fight again I'm going to be hurting a lot. During the whole time I'm fine except for chakra exhaustion, and I didn't bring any soldier pills with me," Sai exclaimed as he put away his tanto. "I don't think we can continue the mission even if we were in top shape," Sakura commented. "Whatever Naruto did just now, it looks like it took him far away from here." She added. "Sakura is right," Kakashi said as he looked around for some hopeful signs of Naruto, but of course found none. "It looked like he used some kind of technique similar to my sensei's Horin. He's probably gotten a good away from us too, and it'd be impossible for us to track him since we don't know which direction he teleported to before we caught up to him. It looked like he was going north through Fire Country," Sasuke said while Sakura began healing his wounds. "He won't stay in Fire Country for long, not with Konoha knowing that he's still alive," Kakashi said as he pulled out a scroll and began writing in it. His plan was to send Pakyun ahead of them to inform Tsunade of what had just transpired with their wounds in low chakra. It would take Team 7 a while longer to get back to the village. The only place north that Naruto would go to is Spring Country since he's good friends with Kayuki-sama, Kakashi added as he finished writing. Once he was done with the scroll, he took some blood from a wound and performed a quick set of Hand seal slamming his hand on the ground, he said ku no jutsu. And followed by a small puff of smoke appeared a small puppy with a Konoha headband on his person. Yo Pakken said. Before he got a good look at Kakashi. Whoa Kakashi, the hell happened to you? You look like you came back from a date gone wrong, the dog Nin exclaimed. Is that what I really look like at those times? Kakashi asked himself, a sweat drop appearing in response towards Pakyun's description, but he soon shook it off as he handed the dog Nin a scroll. We just had a confrontation with Naruto, didn't you say that the Hokage wanted you guys to negotiate with him? Pakken asked, interrupting Kakashi's explanation. Yes, but we weren't able to convince and forced to try and detain him, Kakashi said, an annoyed tone in his voice that was a sign to Pakyun to shut up and let Kakashi finish speaking. This scroll has the info of what happened along with which way we believe Naruto went in the location. This is for the eyes of the HOK only. Do not let anyone else see it before her. Also tell Tsunade-sama I'll have a detailed report when we return to the village. The copy, Nin said. Got it, Pakyun said as he took the scroll with his mouth biting down on it so while his teeth didn't tear through it, it wouldn't fall out of his mouth. Without wasting a second, Pakyun sped off at impressive speed towards Fire Country and towards Konoha. While Pakken was performing his task, Kakashi turned towards the rest of Team 7. Pakyun will most likely get back to the village a day or two ahead of us. We'll move at a more leisurely pace so we don't exhaust ourselves then. We're aller and not reopen our wounds, but it's imperative that we get back to the village as soon as possible to think of our next move before Akatsuki gets to Naruto. Kashi said. Hey, personally I doubt they will give him much trouble seeing how he managed to toss all four of us like rag dolls. Sass grunted as he sheathed his choku. We were trying to capture him without causing any permanent damage. Kakashi rebuffed. Akatsuki won't care in what condition he will be in as long as he's brought back alive. There was a brief but tense moment of silence before Sai broke it. By the way, what was that attack that he used to deflect your Chidori S-ban? I never saw a technique like that before, Sai said, looking at Sake. Kakashi was also curious as well, since he saw the technique or a little of it, but he did see the explosion. If Sake hadn't dodged it, then the young Uchiha would have been fatally injured or dead. I was wondering the same thing, Sake. The technique looked like a Kaden technique, the copycat said. I had thought so too, but it was since I didn't see any fire chakra in it, Sass said as he got up. He looked towards the crater formed by the attack's explosion internally. Glad he had dodged it. I was able to see the words he said, and he said on my Odin, not Kaden. Kakashi's visible eyebrow went up, surprised by that. On my Odin, are you sure? Kakashi asked intently. Sasuke nodded. Yeah, it might be AK Gen or something the Uchi suggested. To be honest, Sake, I hope you're wrong and just heard it incorrectly, Kakashi said quietly, but enough for the rest of his team to hear, because if it is, then I think things got just a hell of a lot harder. Konoha Hokage's office 3 days after Team 7's battle with Naruto, an annoyed Tsunade slammed the door to her office hard, nearly knocking them off their hinges. A sign she was angry. Behind her was her SC senior apprentice and assistant, as well as the niece of her deceased lover Dan Shizen and Kakashi Hadaki, the latter with some bandages and band-aids on his body since he and his team had just got back to the village. Sitting on the windowsill was Jiraiya, whom seemed pretty anxious to hear Kakashi's reports as well as some other things which shockingly had nothing to do with his research. But back to Tsunade, the reason for the Hokage's annoyance was the council meeting that had just ended a few minutes ago. The reason surrounding the events of Team 7's mission and its objective. Even in this kind of situation, a council meeting would not be needed unless something that affected the village as a whole and required the meeting. Even the event of a team being sent out to bring back a former shinobi of the village, the Ginnik Diod, were to happen, it wouldn't be necessary for a council to be summoned. The reason being that all missions are given to by the HOK, who is the only person whom can know about the mission's parameter and its results, and did not need to be known to the council. None of that mattered in this case, for the reason was because that Danzo, after learning from Sai about the results of the mission, summoned a council meeting, though the Hokage herself could only do such a thing if the topic was, as said before, of importance concern to the village. Then another member of the council could call a meeting. In this case was the growing fear that Naruto might want to exact revenge towards the village. Danzo had hoped that by playing on their fears of Naruto, the civilian council, and maybe some members of the shinobi council would force Tsunade to label Naruto as a missing nin, or the very least making his retrieval back to the village as a primary focus where Danzo could secretly enforce loyalty onto the boy. Kakashi was also there since his team leader. It was his job to report what happened during the mission. However, that did not turn out to be the case. Naruto hadn't killed any of the members of Team 7 and as such could not be labeled a missing nin. Unless there was solid evidence that he had killed a shinobi of Konoha, of course. The civilian council put up a stunk about it, but after a harsh scolding where one member of the council was knocked straight through the walls courtesy of Tsunade when he said the word abomination, did they stand down. And so now we find ourselves in the Hokage's office with Tsunade already sending the U away before putting up the privacy seals. Sometimes I wish my grand uncle didn't come up with that damn council idea, Tsunade of the present groaned as she popped back down in her seat. Yeah, and after seeing the look on Danzo's face after hearing about Naruto's skill set from both Kakashi and most likely Sai, the old war hawk will probably do everything in his power to get Naruto under his control. Your permission or not, Jiraiya commented as he sat on his usual windowsill. Okay Kakashi, I know that you held back a lot of stuff that was left out during the meeting, but seeing the fact that I got a letter from the case cage asking why is Suna border patrol saw your team leaving, though I have a feeling that he had found out from Naruto somehow. I believe that the situation is a lot more serious than you made it out to be. Now I want the full story of what happened when your team encountered Nar. Tsunade ordered the silverhair Jan. Kakashi sighed before going into detailed explanation of how he and his team ran into Naruto, and after failing to negotiate with him, apparently he holds quite the grudge towards us, specifically me and Sakura. Sai also got on his bad side by insulting him, told you that sending them was a bad idea. Gia added. Tsunade gave her former teammate a brief glare before looking back at the Janin. What about Sas? Tsunade asked. I'm not fully sure about Sas, Kakashi said. Naruto didn't really sound as hostile towards him as he did with the rest of the team, despite having been used as target practice for a Chidori, though that isn't saying that Naruto doesn't hold some animosity towards Sake, so that means the next team we send has to be on good terms with Naruto the next time we get wind of him, Tsunade concluded before asking another question that she has been meaning to ask since the team got back. Kakashi, revolving around your fight with Naruto, how would you rank him skill-wise? Tsunade asked as she was quite surprised when she read the report from Kakashi given to her by Pakun about how bad Team 7's injuries were. It was rare to see one of the village's top Jan to be such a mess. Kakashi said he had expected this question to be asked and had already formed a response for it. Well, he's gotten fast, that's for sure, and is equally strong too. Naruto also had some kind of advanced Shunin technique that creates an afterimage of himself. His reaction timing is at least JN and level along with Teu, and we discovered he's a wind user. He must have gotten it from Minato. He did have a high affinity for both lightning and wind chakra. Gia added. Kakashi nodded in agreement before continuing. From what I saw so far, Naruto's WI techniques seem to resolve mostly around close to mid-range that involve impact and piercing methods. Along with having an impressive wind technique for defense and offense, it's possible that he might have wind techniques that can use the wind for other areas such as cutting. Kakashi paused for a breather before going on. Naruto, from what my Sharingan could see, has twice the amount of chakra he had 6 years ago, so that means his levels are almost Bu levels. He also has pretty good chakra control since somehow he was able to release a small pulse of chakra to cancel out Sakura's chakra enhanced punch with ease. That part shocked the two Sonin and Shisen both. The fact that Naruto had discovered a way to stop the chakra enhanced strength Sakura had learned from Tsunade, along with the fact that Kakashi calculated Nar to have Bu level chakra and incredible control, given the fact that when he was younger the Uzumaki had poor control due to his large reserves. It really was quite a shocker. It made Tati wonder where Naruto was doing for the past 6 years to have gotten such strength and at the same time control. Hell, if Naruto hadn't been banished, then he would have been a Jan by now, or even Hokage, but Kakashi wasn't done as he continued. That last 4 things to know is that Naruto can use his mother's chakra chains by the looks of it, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think he can use Sensei's horn since he suddenly vanished at the end of the fight along With those two he's pretty skilled in kenjutsu as he was using the Seker well against Sass and Sizz Inc. Lions the Jan. Said that really floored it for the other three occupants of the room while. The idea of Naruto using Cash's favorite chakra chains wasn't all that surprising. Since there was always the chance of Naruto inheriting it, the fact that he could use Minato's Horin or a variation or something related to it showed that Naruto was no longer the same boy that left the village but still had the talent of being the most unpredictable shinobi out there. How is that possible? The chakra chains I could understand since it's possible for it to have been passed down to him genetically from Kushina and it is an Uzumaki clan technique, but any notes for seal formula for the Horin is either sealed deep within their estate or died with Minato, the only people who could use it as the Hokage protection platoon, but they need to be doing it together to use it, Jiraiya said before quickly adding in. Now you're telling me that the Gaki has the SEC, one of the famous weapons of the Uzumaki clan, the same sword Kushina brought with her, and is supposed to be sealed in the estate, the Toad Sage asked. To which his response from the Janin was a nod. Tsunade had grabbed a bottle of sake that had been sitting on her desk and took a quick chug of sake to calm her nerves. After doing so, she looked up at Kakashi. You said there was a fourth thing. What was it? Tsunade asked, though she had a feeling that it was going to give her another headache. Kakashi hesitated for a moment before finally replying. During the fight, Naruto used a technique that wasn't a futon technique on sake. At first I thought it was a Kaden technique, but Sass later clarified that Naruto had said onoin the moment she heard the word on it. In Tsunade's mind flash back to her grandmother Mito Uzumaki and something she had told Tsunade long ago. Meanwhile, Shizen replied to Kakashi, on my Odin, as in the non-elemental chakra nature on my Odin. How is that possible? Are you saying that Naruto has a bloodline? Shizen asked. Maybe, but whether it is or isn't, we don't really know its full potential, or Naruto to be exact. Kakashi said. I admit that I went in unprepared, mostly hoping not to resort to force also. Because in case we did, I thought he would have been the same kid that left this village 6 years ago. I didn't think he'd have changed so much. That would be an understatement if what I learned is true, Jiraiya said, catching everyone's attention including Tsunade, who snapped out of her thoughts. What do you mean? Tsunade asked. Remember a few days ago when I said that the mask the Gaki wore sounded familiar? Jiraiya asked. Well, I looked into it and discovered that starting from 4 years ago, a wandering nin had been making a name for himself doing things such as helping overthrowing corrupting governments or stopping coup d'etat in several countries, said countries being Moon Country, Bird Country and Vegetable Country. The man also helped Hoser in overthrowing their corrupt leader and even helped the High Priestess of Demon Country in defeating an ancient demon called Morio before it could be fully resurrected. And the most notable thing of all is that the person assisted the Kiri rebels in the Civil War, and from what my spies have heard was the one who defeated Yagura the Yandi Mizukage and the Sandy Jiki at the time all by himself. Ja paused to catch his breath before finishing it off. And so far no one knows what the guy looks like or his real name. The only thing anyone besides maybe higher ups in these places had to go by so far is that the man has red hair and wears a kitsune mask similar to the one that Shino described Naruto wearing, hence the guy was called Kodama Fox Spirit due to his fox mask, and that he always appears and disappears on a whim. Shizen and Kakashi all had wide eyes and jaws hitting the floor, the latter excluding Kakashi since he had his mask on. They had no idea that Naruto had become that strong over the past 6 years, but when they thought about it, Naruto was never one to give up, giving his strong will and determination, and it also made sense seeing how easily he defeated his former team. Those accomplishments meant that Naruto had to be S rank in skills, hell maybe even greater than that, but that also meant one other thing that basically also means that in off chance that we have to use force and capture Naruto, which by the sounds of it is going to be hell itself, we'll have to deal with Wind Wave, Spring Tea, Vegetable Bird, Moon Demon, Water Sonakar, Kiger Taker, Euchre Gugar, and Hosek. Tsunade basically summed it all up. When Ja nodded, she groaned loudly before slammed her head on the table. Apparently she was greatly aggravated because her headbutt caused the desk to split in two. Shizen immediately left to get another desk, leaving only the Hokage alone with her former teammate in Kakashi. Finally the copycat shinobi spoke. Well, political reasons aside, it might be better to let Naruto live his life if what Jiras-sama said is true. Then he's clearly capable of defending himself at nearly anything thrown at him, including Akatsuki, and it's quite clear he has no desire to come back here and continuing. This might only increase his distaste towards the village. Hell, it might make him join another village such as Sunar. Kiri Kakashi explained. Yeah, but for how long? Jiraiya asked before looking at Tati. While I agree with Kakashi on this, we also got to look at the K2, such as the fact that Danzo won't just let Naruto wander around aimlessly or join another village. The War Hawk will take action to get him back, and most likely under his control. He won't risk killing him since only an Uzumaki can contain the Kawi unless Naruto has a kid. Then there's the fact that Naruto's actions that I've mentioned as well. Some others put the kid in the top 10 of the bingo books in several villages as well as the black market, according to my source say. The price on his head can set a person for life, and there's no telling if he can take on a large group of people if they gang up on him. Also, I don't think I need to explain about Akatsuki. Everyone in that group is cage level shinobi and more experienced than Naruto, and then there's a chance of the leader of AO2C going into the fray. There is no telling how strong that person is. You're right, Jiraiya, Tsunade said sadly as she began writing on a scroll that had survived being crushed along with her desk. As much as I hate to do it, it's for the brat's own good. If he is returned to the village where he can be better protected, I'll take the possibility of him hating the village and me, and I accept it. I'll also reveal his full heritage when he returns. Hopefully that will get the villagers and shinobi to leave him alone and maybe even convince him to stay. I'll let him live in the Senju compound since I usually live here in the HOK mansion and he's technically family anyway. She had finished her sentence at the same time she finished the scroll and handed it to Kakashi. That is the list of those that will be part of the next retrieval team. For now, since we don't know where Naruto is, the members will have to focus on preparing for the confrontation. Also, I want you and your team to tell the others all of the techniques that Naruto used during the fight, at least to give them some measure of being prepared. Also inform them of Nuts alias 2. Kakashi nodded and left. A split second later with a Shunin, I have a funny feeling I'm on that list, aren't I? Jiraiya said. Damn straight. You are, along with Team 7, 8, 9 and 10 with their teachers minus Karenai. Since either she or Ashuma has to stay back to watch over their kid, she's the best choice since I don't think Genjutsu will do much against Naruto, so I'm replacing her with Yuga, whose Kenjutsu should be enough to match Naruto's. Along with that, I'm going to send Tenzo, Anko, Iruka and Shisen 2-0, the last two, hopefully make him see reason before we have to use force, and in the off chance that things really go to hell, I'll have the Hokage platoon on standby to use the Horin and teleport me to the area. That's a bit extreme, don't you think? Jiraiya asked as he listened to what Tsunade said. Hey, I don't like it either, but you said it yourself that Naruto is about S rank in terms of skills. We don't know the extent of those skills, but he was clearly a match for Team 7. Even if their orders were to capture him, Naruto can most likely control the Kawi and use its chakra, and since it's clear he won't return to the village willingly, we'll most likely have to use force, and it won't be easy. Sending a large group of people who are tuning to John and level is the best chance of bringing him back in the events that negotiations fail. Tsunade replied. Besides, with Tenzo there, he can use his Muden to bind Naruto if either way. Kakashi can get the necklace on him, and the numbers should be able to take on Akatsuki in the off chance that they encounter them during the mission, and in the event we do use force and bring him back, we'll have hell raining down on us from not just the kid but from a long line of villages and nations not pleased of having their hero being forced back to his home. Jay added. Yeah, but it's better than having Naruto being captured by Akatsuki, turned into a weapon by another villager Danzo, or worse, killed just so someone can make a profit from his corpse. The way I see it, it's the lesser of two evils to have him brought back to the village so we can protect him. Tsunade replied before getting up, heading towards the door to exit her office. Going to get a drink? Jiraiya asked as he watched his former teammate leave the room. He figured that all that's happening now, the decisions she's making, he wouldn't blame for wanting to get drunk to ease her mind. However, her words to his question were different. No, to the SJU compound. There's something of my grandmother's that I need to see to confirm a suspicion of mine. Meanwhile, I want you to get your spy network working on finding Nuts' location. The faster we find it before anyone else does, the better, Tsunade ordered before leaving the office, not even giving Jiraiya a chance of asking what she meant. Konaha Training Ground 7. Konaha 12. The members of the unofficial Konaha 12-Psi had gathered at Team 7's former training ground in order to hear from Sake and Sakura about their encounter with Naruto. By the time they were finished with the story, the others all had shocked expressions on their faces. After a moment of silence, it was Ino who surprisingly spoke first. I admit I did not expect Naruto-san to have become that powerful. Looking back, I'm glad that I made the logical decisions of not engaging him when I had the chance. The Abam said, I wonder where Naro got that sword he was using. Maybe he could let me take a look at it. Tenten said thoughtfully to herself when she heard the sword Naruto wielded as described by Sake. Yash, I am happy to know that Nut's flames of youth have not diminished over the years, Rock Lee said. Before adding, though the mention of him not wanting to return to the village is most concerning. That's an understatement of the century. Shikamaru Nara said in return, it's a good chance that the Hokage is going to send out another retrieval team, and I have the troublesome feeling it's going to be SP. Perhaps not. Maybe Hokage-sama will just leave Naruto-kan alone if he's happier outside the village. Hinata Hyuga said in her usual shy voice. While she was happy to know that her crush was still alive, it also saddened her that he no longer wanted to return to his home, but she knew that he would be a lot happier outside Konoha anyway. She might be thinking that, but she knows that she won't have a choice in the matter. Sasuke said the risks of him being captured by Akatsuki or another village that wants to increase their strength are too great, and as Shikamaru said before, it's probably a good chance that another team will be sent to retrieve him, and it will most likely be us. You don't think she'll send all of us to you? Choi asked his best friend Shikamaru while munching on some chips. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. If what Sasuke and Sakura says is true, and that they along with Kakashi-sensei and Sai couldn't lay a finger on Naruto, then Hokage-sama will definitely send all of us so that we can overwhelm him, or maybe that a few of us will be able to convince him to return to Konoha willingly. Also, we have to find him first before anything else. Couldn't you just ask Tamari where Naruto might be? Ino asked her teammate. She already left to head back to her village, and even if she was still here, she wouldn't tell me anything. That troublesome woman is too damn stubborn. Hell, I doubt even your father mind reading Anko and I San together would be able to get the answers out of her. Shikamaru said, though he was more focused on the fact how this would affect their relationship. Dating someone from another village wasn't simple. You know it probably won't be that bad. Kba said suddenly. There's no way he'll be able to stand up against all of us if we gang up on him, and I bet after the Hokage apologizes he'll become the same idiot we all know and blow this whole thing over like he always does. Kba said positively, though it didn't seem like the others shared in the Inuzuka idea. Doubtful, Sasuke said in response, but either way, until we hear any word of his new location, we won't be going after Naro for a while, especially if it's in a country that our presence could cause serious problems for the village and fire country. Also, Hokage Sama, that this is an S-ranked secret, meaning we can't tell anyone, especially the civilians, though she said that the Ichiraku were the sole exception, so that means no gossip talking. Ino Pig Sakura said to her old friend, half serious and half playful. Hey, I'm not that bad, Ino retorted in her defense before looking towards the others for support, but God only silence. Right in another place in the village, one of the shinobi's bar, a similar conversation was going on between several people. Kakashi was talking with Asuma, Guy Yumoto, and Iruka about the mission they were given involving Naruto. Kakashi had already told Anko and Yuga respectively, and just like with the four men with him, he also filled them in on Naruto's alias. He told them that their students would be informed later on. Currently, he was telling his colleagues about his team's fight with Naruto back in Wind Country a few days ago. When Kakashi finished his tale, the others had looks of surprise and amazement. Damn, Ashuma said, being the first to break the silence. I didn't think the kid would have gotten that strong, though. It's kind of hard to believe that he's this Kodama character that I've been hearing about. Same for me, but Jas-sama seems pretty sure that they're one in the same. Kakashi replied, if you look at the achievements that Kodama did, then it would make sense that it's just Naruto's alias. They also have a thing in common. Corrupted and cruel individuals. Naruto has always been the one to save people from oppression and unfairness. Iruka added, still I must admit that it's hard to believe how much the kid had changed from an orange loudmouth to his rank shinobi in just 6 years. Ashuma said, still having trouble Believing it truly Naruto's flames of youth are brighter than ever if he has accomplished such feats. I look forward to seeing him again. Guy said. I doubt it will be a friendly reunion, Kakashi said. Everyone noticed the depressed tone in his voice. How bad is it? Asuma asked. Kakashi sighed. Well, does the fact that we're bringing Iruka with us help show how bad the situation is? He asked rhetorically before looking at Iruka. No offense, I know your skills are good, but excluding the Ichiraku and Shisen, you're the only other person who was kind to Naruto. You might have a better chance than anyone else in the village. Iruka nodded solemnly as he took all that in. It also wouldn't hurt to get in a bit of training just in case. Guess he could go and ask Anko for some help anyway. We're not moving until we know where Naruto is, and in a place where our presence won't cause any problems for the village. Kakashi said. JS-sama and Hokage-sama decided that we'll begin preparing the retrieval team tomorrow as a whole. We'll also have to take in the chance of running into Akatsuki too. The others nodded in agreement. A meeker standing on the edge of the highest tower of the medal-like village that was a meeker was a spiky orange-haired man wearing the Akatsuki cloak. What was unique about him was that covering most of his face were multiple piercings, with 3 on both sides of his nose, 2 under his lip, and several on his ears. The other thing were his eyes. They were a metallic silver color with a ripple-like pattern in them converging on a tiny black dot-like pupil. Currently the man was simply staring up at the sky, completely ignoring the endless rain falling down on him. Pain, a female voice said from behind the man. Named Pei turned around and saw a person standing at the entrance of the tower. It was a female who appeared to be in her 30s-40s and wore the Akatsuki cloak as well. She had blue-colored hair and amber eyes with a lighter blue paper flower in her hair on the front right side. Like Pain, she also had a piercings but only had one, which was directly underneath her bottom lip. The woman also wore lavender eyes shadow too. He's here, the woman continued. Understood, Conan. Pain said to the woman before entering the tower, spotting a third person just like Pei and Conan. The third person, a male, also wore the Atsuki cloak, but his entire face minus his black spiky hair was completely hidden by an orange mask with a swirl that converged onto a single eye hole on the right side of the mask. I assume that Zetsu told you about the recent information he gathered on the Kawigiki Ma? Pei asked. The masked man said. Man looked at Pei, and for a brief second a Sharingan could be seen from the single eye hole on the man's mask. Indeed, and I see that I'm not the only one surprised by what Zetsu recorded. Zetsu had managed to record the fight between Naruto and his old team in the Land of Wind in order for the Akatsuki scout spy to gain information on the Geki's current skill level. Needless to say, the scout was shocked at said boy's skill level as well as the rest of Akatsuki when the plant man showed the recorded battle to them the next day. Pair Nagato, being his real name, was quiet for a while after watching it before finally speaking, giving the order that for now Naruto would be left alone until he came to a decision of how to deal with the Kawigiki. He told the rest of Akatsuki to continue focusing on capturing the other Jin Shariki to be able to fight 2 Sharingan users 1-inch rank shinobi and escape unscathed is quite an impressive feat. Conan commented, joining in the conversation. Indeed, Ma said in agreement. His use of kenjutsu when techniques and even the chakra chains that his mother could use are impressive. And the technique he used at the end looks similar to the Yandi Hokage's Horizon, the masked man commented, but I believe that the real topic in mind is his Sabelement Onoin, a chakra nature that surpasses even the Shim Hokage's Muden, and an element that only one who wields the Renegan can use. Nagato said the truth actually was that the Renegan enabled to use Onoin by combining its 2 divided chakra natures, Yin release and Yang release, which is how the Rudo Sinan, the original bearer of the dojutsu, could use his BNB Butsu Su no Jutsu creation of all things technique. And despite his great powers, Nag's skills were nowhere near the sage's, and he had only been able to use the technique to the extent of controlling several bodies like he was doing now. But Naruto's Onoin allowed Naruto to actually use the chakra nature along with Yin release and Yang release. Indeed, there has only been one other person who had the K-Gen, and was coincidentally also a member of the Uzumaki clan. Ma said, my grandfather. Siko Uzumaki. Nagato said suddenly. Conan seemed surprised, not that Nagato was in Uzumaki since he told her a long time ago, but that he was the grandson of the most powerful man since the Rudo Sennin. Ma, however, wasn't surprised by either, even though he was wearing a mask. covering his face, but the evidence was in his voice, which remained calm and collected as he said, "So you know it wasn't a question I found out from my mother when I was a child," Pain said quickly, not wanting to bring up those memories of better times, as if reading her old friend's mind. Conan changed the subject, "But that doesn't explain how the Geeki has it, even if he is from the same clan. That doesn't mean he could have Sodiko Sabelement. Neither the Shim's children or grandchildren inherited the Muden, and Nagato didn't inherit Onodin from his grandfather, so why does the boy have it?" she said without hesitation. Ma replied, "While you bring up a good point, the best explanation is that, like Nagato, Naruto is also closely related to Sadahiko, being his great-grandson from his mother's side." Conan's eyes widened, as did Nagato's diva path before the latter reverted back to his normal impassive look. "And how did you know that?" Nagato asked with a hint of edge in his voice, this time unfazed by it. "Ma merely said I kept close tabs on the last Kawigariki, Kushina Uzumaki, when she was alive, and while doing so discovered of her being Psycho's granddaughter. I prefer to have tabs on anything related to that man if I could, but our target is the Gariki, not Sodiko." Nagato added, "Yes. But that doesn't make it any less dangerous if the Jinu Riki has the bloodline and mastered it. Even if not on the same level as Sodiko, he could become very difficult to capture, combined with how he managed to escape from a tracking expert of Kakashi's level, along with the fact we still don't know the full extent of his abilities. We cannot afford to be reckless." Ma rebuked. "You seem to be quite nervous with anything revolving around Siko," Conan said a little bit mockingly. She never did trust the Uchiha due to her feelings that he was merely using Nagato, and took a little bit of joy at seeing him showing signs other than calm and confident. However, Maa was far from being angry at the hidden insult. "You would too if you saw what that man was capable of," the Uchi said. "While he is the only other person I have ever respected, along with Hashirama, Sadahiko Uzumaki is the only person in the world whom I've also feared too. That man was able to take both Hashirama and myself at the same time, and defeated us too. His skills with Onoin, as well as Fuinjutsu, Kenjutsu, and his clan's solid chakra-shaped manipulation made him a fierce shinobi of unparalleled levels. And don't even get me started on what happened when he was enraged." Soon Ma turned around and began making his way towards the same edge that Pei had been standing just a few moments ago. "After 6 years of staying off the radar, we finally located the Kawigariki. We cannot lose him again, and we cannot afford to make any mistakes, not when we're close to completing our goal." And with that, the ancient Uiha disappeared into thin air, leaving only Pain in the endless rain. But the angel of Ager could tell that something was troubling her old friend, judging from the way that Diva Path was staring out into the stormy sky. "Is something wrong, Nagato? You've been very quiet ever since this new info on the Kabijiki was given," Conan said. At first the god of Eager did not respond, but after a minute Nagato spoke. "Uzushio fell sometime around the beginning of the Third Shinobi World War. So why is it that my mother and Uzumaki, and furthermore the daughter of the clan leader at the time, was living in this country before Uzushio fall?" Conan's eyes widened a little as she continued to listen to Nagato. "Until recently I haven't been really thinking about it. My mind focused on other things, but now if the Kabigariki is indeed connected to Siko Uzumaki in some way, then there is also a chance he might head to Whirlpool Country. If that happens, I will see to his capture personally and hopefully find an answer to my question next day. Land of Spring Daio's palace. I really wish I didn't have to wear this every time when I stayed here," Naruto mumbled to himself as he looked in the mirror. Since he revealed to her that he was still alive 4 years ago, Kuki Kazuhana, the Tao of Spring Country, had been kind enough to give Naro a room in the palace whenever he stopped by. Unfortunately, due to the fact he was a guest in Adu's palace, Naruto had to look respectable, meaning wearing a kimono instead of his usual outfit, or even just a normal short-sleeve shirt and pants. Hence why he was now wearing a red and black yukata, something that Naruto didn't like. He felt vulnerable in it. Though he was probably being paranoid, the good news was that he was allowed to have Seker strapped to his waistband. Also, he had wristbands with seals on them too. Naruto just let out a sigh as he adjusted the sash before putting on his sandals and walked out the door of his room. He gave a polite nod towards some passerby servants as he headed towards the garden, where a servant told him that Kiyuki currently was with Kiko. And Eugen Narut had a feeling that Kiyuki would normally be doing something Politic related, but it was a good bet that Kiko convinced her using the infamous puppy dog I know jutsu on the Spring Dao. There wasn't a single person that had met Kiko who didn't succumb to the trip's ranked kinjutsu along with the little girl's charms. Hell, even Gar wasn't immune to it from both Kiko and his own children. A few minutes later, Naruto had arrived to the medium-sized indoor-outdoor garden. Originally it was just an indoor garden including a glass dome over it. The reason is because spring country was still snow country at that time, and the glass dome helped protect the flowers from being frozen to death. Of course, now that it wasn't winter 24/7, Kiyuki had the dome remade to allow someone to open a close it manually, and sitting on a bench at the center of the garden where Kiyuki, who was playing with Kiko, the little girl, happily laughing as she picked out flowers. Both of them were wearing yukata. Kiko wearing a blue and red yukata while Kiyuki wore a plain aqua and purple color, instead of her more day-signed one that she wears for appearances during her duties as Dao. Also in the garden were several light-armored samurai guards, and though not visible for Yuki Nins, those that had remained loyal to Kiyuki and her father when her uncle took over the country, and Yugen, who stood across from the guards but still had Kiko in his sights. Eugen had a very unique appearance. He was taller than a normal human being, between 6 to 7 feet, had a dark green-colored skin, and he had no hair on his head either. His eyes had red Sura instead of the normal white, with his eyes being completely black. He wore a simple long-sleeved brown hooded cloak that reached his ankles, along with dark blue shinobi pants and shinobi black sandals. The explanation to Eugen's unique appearance was simple: he wasn't human. The Raikudo Sinan created Eugen using his Bambutsu Su no Jutsu, creation of all things technique 1,000 years ago. This made Eugen the only being alive who was older than the Baeus. The reason for his creation was because the sage wanted Eugen to watch over the world after his passing, to record the history of the world and one day aid the one who would take the sage's mantle as the savior of the world. During the first few years since his creation, Eugen had befriended the Uzumaki clan. He had a lot in common with them, namely their interest in history and knowledge, and Eugen swore loyalty to the Uzumaki clan for eternity. When Uzushio was being invaded, Eugen was given the task of safeguarding the underground vault that housed the clan's important scrolls and relics, so to keep them out of the hands of the unworthy and to help survivors of the clan that ever came back to Whirlpool Country. That's how Naruto met him when said boy came to the island after learning about his lineage. That was actually about 2 months after he left Konoha, and since then Eugene has faithfully served Naro for the past 6 years, along with babysitting Kiko when Nar was busy, and if he wasn't available, well, let's just say Naro never had to worry about finding a babysitter for Kiko. His thoughts were cut off when his daughter's voice shouted "Daddy," and soon said girl ran towards him. Naruto barely had enough time to grab Kiko into a hug, but still managed to do it, and took comfort as he felt his daughter's warmth against his body. Even though it was for a brief second, that was enough for Naro to feel like he finally had a light in his life of dark misery and pain. When he put her down, Kiko still had the same smile Naruto always had when he was younger, another sign of their daughter father bond. Andy Kuki and I are making crowns, see, she said as she showed Naruto a band of flowers in her hand. This yours, she said silly as she put it into Naruto's hand. Nar smiled softly as he took it, rubbing his daughter's head. Thank you, Kiko-chan, he said with kindness. His response was a beaming smile from Kiko, who quickly ran back to another batch of flowers, now focusing on making another crown for herself and for her auntie Kiyuki. As she was doing that with Eugen near her, Nar sat down on the bench beside Kiyuki, both of them looking at the little red head. After a few moments of comfortable silence, Naruto spoke. Thanks again for letting me, Kiko Chan and Eugen-san, stay in your palace for a few days. Kiyuki-chan, the older redhead, said to the spring daimyo. No problem, Naruto, I'm always happy to have you and Kiko-chan over. That, and my movie director is very grateful to you for letting them turn your book into a movie, Kuki said, her comment making Naro scratch the back of his sheepishly. 3 years after his banishment and completing his own training, Naruto began writing a book, calling it Wandering Spirit by the Crimson Tide, the alias he used instead of his real name. The story was mostly based off of his own personal life. It told the tale of a person who was betrayed by the people he swore to protect in his life afterwards. As he traveled the world seeking to find his place in life, the story was mixed of drama, adventure, and some comedy in the book too. To be honest, Naruto didn't really plan on publishing it, and it took some coaxing from Eugen and Sodiko to release his ideas. By the end of the first set of 6 months, the book had become a tremendous hit, easily being more popular than Jia's Iya series. The money he got was greatly welcomed to help Naruto survive, and now being used to help Kiko too. So after 3 more years, Naruto had already published 2 more books with the series, all of them tremendous hits, with no one able to figure out he was the writer. Naruto had revealed to Kiyuki he was the writer, with her director begging to turn the book into a movie with Kuki starring as the main female character. Of course, Naruto was sort of uncomfortable with the idea, but eventually agreed, if not to see what it looks like on film and the extra money would be appreciated, it was no problem, just make sure that myself and the others get free tickets for it, Naruto said jokingly. Of course, Kuki replied in similar joking manner with a giggle. After it, the two once more entered a moment of comfortable silence as they watched Kiko, who was still skimming for suitable flowers. But after a few minutes, Naruto noticed that Kiyuki looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to ask him something but was nervous to speak. Is something wrong? Naruto asked her. Kuki hesitated for a second but finally managed to speak. Well, I know that it doesn't sound like a big deal, but ever since I saw you with your hair dyed red, I assumed that it was because Kiko inherited her mother's red hair and you wanted people to think she got it from you. The Tao said that's the reason why she hesitated. Naruto thought to himself, Kuki probably thought it would have given Naruto bad memories of mentioning Kiko-chan's physical traits, that she assumed Kiko got her hair color from her mother, but that was far from the truth. The Uzumaki clan, mine and my mother's clan, were not just known for our long lives and mastery of Fujitsu, but also that every member was born with red hair. Naruto said to Kiyuki, who was listening intently, I dyed my hair in order to hide my identity a little bit, but also to honor my clan. Kiko-chan got her red hair from me. That surprised Kiyuki a little. She had heard about the Uzumaki clan and how they lived on the now deserted Whirlpool country, but she had still assumed that Kiko had inherited her hair color from her mother, so Kiko-chan didn't inherit her red hair from her mother's side. Kuki asked. Naruto chuckled, but it was an empty chuckle. Kiko-chan didn't inherit anything from her mother because there was no mother, he replied dry. But before Kuki could ask what he meant by that, when Naruto suddenly jolted a little, the emergency alert seal I left for Gar at Suna just activated, Naruto said to a confused Kiyuki. A seal I gave to Gar in case if he ever had to contact me for something. It sends the chakra of the user to me, and judging by the surge of it, it must be very important, Naruto explained as he looked at a glowing seal on his wristband. Then he looked at Kuki. I'm sorry to do this after I just got here, but could you? Kuki waved her hand. It's fine, your friend the Saw's cage might be in trouble, so you should hurry. The Spring Daimo said. Naruto smiled gratefully before looking at Eugen. I'm heading back to Suna for a bit. When you get the chance, try and look into that thing I asked. Eugen bowed. Yes, Naruto-sama, he said respectfully. Nar looked at the girl looking at him with her innocent childlike eyes. Naruto smiled kindly at her. Daddy needs to go and see something, but I'll be right back, so be good for Andy. Kiyuki sweetie, Naruto said before teleporting in a red flash towards Sonokar through his Mado God's Gate technique. 2 days later, River Country, near the border between Wind and Rain Country. 3 figures could be seen moving or flying, in one's case at a casual pace. The first 2 were human and wore long dark blue cloaks with red clouds along with conical straw hats with a small ornamental torques and tassels covering their faces. The first one was a male and seemed pretty normal in appearance and looked to be relatively young, somewhere in between his late teens and early 20s. An odd thing about him was that his left arm was missing, with the sleeve of said arm torn apart at the end. His companion was the more odd-looking one. This person was a male, but was hunched back and thus shorter than the first male. The third being wasn't a human but instead a giant white owl flying near the ground, but above the 2 men wrapped securely in its tail was the unconscious form of Gar, who was also covered in bruises. The one-armed male spoke. We should be near the hideout soon. Yeah, the male said. The hunchback one grunted in response. We would have gotten sooner if you hadn't taken so long, Dira, he said, annoyed. Hey, that's not fair. Sorry, Sama, it's not my fault that the Geeki was so skilled with that sand of his. Yeah, the one named Dira said in his defense. You got cocky and didn't bring enough clay with you when you had the chance after we were done sealing the Sanbi. Suzori countered. Now because of that you're missing an arm and I doubt Kakuzu will attach a new one for you for free. Though his hat was covering his face you could tell Dira had an annoyed look on his face at the realization. The two continued walking for several more minutes, having gone back to a comfortable silence, but it was suddenly broken when a whirling noise in the wind could be heard from behind them. The two spun around and Dira just narrowly avoided being impaled in the face by a kunai. Where the hell did that come from? Dira exclaimed as he looked for the perpetrator. So there was someone else besides that makeup-wearing kid following us, Sori mumbled to himself as he shifted his attention from the ninja in front of him to check the rear along with Dira as the two were trying to find the person who threw the kunai. Neither of them paid any heed to the sky as it darkened before overhead. Wait, why was the sky darkening? What the Dira asked himself as he looked above him just in time to see Naruto dive towards him with a double-bladed edge ninja in hand. Once again DEA was saved by just a few seconds as a silver scorpion-shaped tail lunged at Naruto. The Uzumaki managed to deflect the attack and do mid-air backward flip away from the two Akatsuki members. Damn, Naruto said as he resealed the ninja. I was hoping that I could finish you both off quickly. Yes, that was thoughtful thinking. Dira, his hat having already come off and reveal in his long blonde hair along with his EY scope, narrowed his eyes at the newcomer. Hey, Sori-sama, isn't that Yasuzori said as his hat also came off, revealing his three gray hair strands sticking up from his head along with his mouth being covered by a black cloth sticking out. From the back of his cloak was the silver scorpion tail, the Kawi Gingari, aka Kodama. Looks like he'll be taking down Itachi's target. I can't wait to see the look on his face, Dira said with a cruel smirk forming on his face. Naruto didn't seem affected by the declaration. He merely drew SEC and got into a fighting stance. He was wearing a black coat with long sleeves, along with a hood and red lines running all over the coat forming a whirlpool at the back. Underneath it was a dark blue shirt and mesh shirt under it, along with long black shinobi pants and black sandals too. Naruto was also wearing his normal fingerless black gloves and red bracers over the coat sleeves. You guys have two choices, Naruto said in a calm but at the same time threatening voice. Release Gar willingly and I'll give you a painless death, or this time Naruto's blue eyes darkened, giving off the feeling of a heartless demon in the coldest area on the planet. At the same time I take Gar back by force and give you both a painful death. Which one do you choose?